Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Jared Pratt, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Robert Vine. Today, we commemorate the 104th anniversary of the Battle of Hamel. In the early morning of the 4th of July, 1918, 3 Australian infantry brigades, along with a British tank brigade and supporting artillery, captured the village of La Hamel in northern France. To give combat experience to the newly arrived American Expeditionary Force, companies from United States Army battalions were included in the assault. The date for the attack, American Independence Day, was chosen to mark the first time American doughboys joined Australian diggers in battle. Lieutenant General Sir John Monash, Commander of the Australian Corps, planned the assault meticulously, estimating it would take 90 minutes to capture the key objectives. In fact, it took 93 minutes. A stunning success at the cost of minimal casualties, which has been called a turning point of the First World War on the Western Front. The first modern battle and the perfect battle. While small in scale, Monash's coordinated use of tanks, artillery, infantry and aircraft at Hamel provided a model for later offensives which overwhelmed the German frontline defences and led to the Allied victory of November 1918. This afternoon, as we hear the story of an Australian soldier whose name appears on the Roll of Honour, we also commemorate our American brothers in arms. Today, we remember the Battle of Hamel. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. We're honoured to acknowledge Major General Garrelin, Commander, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Education, Training and Doctrine Command, Mrs. Garrelin and the accompanying delegation. We also warmly welcome Group Captain Mac Cotterill, representing the Air Force Association. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, if able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Corporal Norman Stanley Bathurst Fairbairn. Norman Fairbairn was born on the 7th of May 1891 in Bathurst, New South Wales. Affectionately known as Nin, he was one of 12 children born to John and Ruth Fairbairn. Norman received his education at the local state school and later relocated to the coastal city of Newcastle with his family. There they settled in the suburb of Islington, where Norman began working on the railway as a fettler. Norman Fairbairn enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 6th of August 1915. He was assigned to reinforcements of the 13th Battalion and began a short period of training in Australia. He embarked for active service from Sydney on the 20th of December 1916, sailing on board the troop ship Swavic. Private Fairbairn arrived in Egypt in early 1916, joining a mix of Gallipoli veterans and new recruits preparing to fight on the Western Front. Shortly after his arrival, he contracted influenza and was sent to hospital in Cairo to recover. He briefly returned to his unit in February, but soon fell ill again and returned to hospital, where he remained until July. He embarked for the Western Front in early August, travelling via England, and joined his unit in Belgium in October of 1916. He spent the weeks that followed alternating between working parties and training behind the lines. His unit returned to France in November, just in time to spend the bitterly cold winter of 1916 and 1917 in the trenches. Like many others, he spent time in hospital during this period, having succumbed to the harsh conditions on the front. Early 1917 was marked by the enemy's strategic withdrawal to the fortified Hindenburg Line. Their retreat was eagerly followed by Allied units who seized their opportunity to push the Germans back. In advancing on the enemy, these units were confronted by well-prepared rearguard defences and booby-trapped towns, which resulted in a series of bloody clashes between Allied forces and the Germans. The retreat halted in April near the French village of Bullecourt, where the Germans established part of their new front line. Prior to making an attack on the village, Fairbairn was temporarily promoted to the rank of corporal. His unit attacked on the morning of the 11th of April 1917, with cover provided by tanks rather than artillery. As advancing troops jumped over the parapet, the tanks proved to be worse than useless, and the attacking infantry were left exposed to enemy fire. Soon forced to retreat, Allied units suffered more than 3,000 casualties in one day. Fairbairn's first battle was a baptism by fire. Following the carnage at Bullecourt, Fairbairn's unit was again moved to Belgium, entering trenches on the Ypres salient. There he fought at the Battle of Messines in early June before his rank of corporal was confirmed in July. Later that month, Fairbairn developed an abscess on his leg and again found himself in hospital behind the lines. Between periods of illness and leave, he did not rejoin his unit until late December of 1917. In March 1918, Fairbairn's unit helped repulse the German spring offensive as the enemy made a final desperate attempt to push through Allied lines. The ultimate failure of the enemy's attack prompted the Allies to launch a major offensive of their own. In preparation for this offensive, the strategic town of Hamel needed to be secured. Fairbairn's unit was among those that jumped the parapet in the early hours of the morning on the 4th of July, 1918. Under cover of artillery, tanks and aircraft, the infantry units swiftly advanced, capturing their objectives within 93 minutes. Fairbairn's unit was holding the front line shortly after their success, when one of his comrades, Corporal Simmons, left the safety of the trench to attack a German machine gun post. When he was spotted and wounded by an enemy sniper, Fairbairn left the trench to bring the man in, but was shot through the head before he could reach him. His comrade, Private Reed, later commented, "Fairbairn was a special friend of mine. His action was especially fine as he had quarrelled with Simmons just a few days before." Corporal Fairbairn was buried just outside the town of Villers-Bretonneux. The chaplain later wrote home to Fairbairn's family, "During his service with the battalion, your son deservedly won the esteem of all ranks. He was truly a brave soldier and fearless leader, and his death was the glorious climax of a splendid life." His death was instantaneous, and he was spared all suffering. You have reason to be proud of a truly gallant son, your gift to the Empire being indeed a priceless one. Corporal Norman Fairbairn was 27 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal Norman Stanley Bathurst Fairbairn, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
If able, please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.